In 1978, the federal government quietly mapped a 37-square-mile zone in West Virginia and told almost nobody. The zone centered on a bunker 720 feet into granite, big enough for the entire U.S. Congress, hidden behind a false wall in a luxury resort hotel for 30 years. That bunker is decommissioned, but it's not even the strangest restricted place in Appalachia. This mountain range spans 1,500 miles, from Alabama to Maine. Across its ridges, you'll find nuclear waste burial grounds, germ warfare test sites, and towns erased from the map for national security. Not rumor, record. Here are 25 restricted areas in Appalachia that somebody didn't want you to find. Number 25. Breaks Interstate Park, Backcountry. On the Virginia-Kentucky border, the Russell Fork carved a gorge 1,600 feet deep, the deepest canyon east of the Mississippi. The backcountry behind the ridgeline is a different matter. In 2019, a party of 4 needed helicopter extraction after 3 days lost in a drainage not on consumer GPS. The Forest Service has closed significant sections indefinitely. Unstable sandstone overhangs, unmarked mine shafts from the 1920s coal era, flash flood corridors that rise 6 feet in under an hour. 2 park systems have never fully agreed on where the dangerous zones end. The maps are still incomplete. The rescues keep happening. Number 24. McDowell County coal mine voids. McDowell County, West Virginia, once produced more coal than any county in America. At its peak, 100,000 people lived there. Today, the population is under 17,000. Under approximately 40% of the county's surface area, coal extraction created void spaces, some hundreds of feet across and unmarked. Roads have dropped. Homes have cracked down the middle. In 1998, a school gymnasium floor fell 3 feet mid-class, children inside. The DEP restricts surface activities in mapped subsidence zones, but the mapped zones cover only a fraction of actual risk. Thousands of pre-regulation tunnels were dug before mandatory surveying existed. The ground under McDowell County is not reliably solid. Number 23. Clinch River AEC Nuclear Waste Burial Grounds. Along the Clinch River in Tennessee, 25 miles west of Knoxville, the federal government buried radioactive waste in shallow trenches for decades. Workers drove trucks to these sites, dug trenches, dropped barrels in, covered them up, and drove back. No concrete, no liner, just soil between the waste and the water table. The sites are fenced and monitored now. But monitoring tells a persistent story. Tritium, strontium-90, and cesium-137 have been found in groundwater exceeding EPA limits multiple times. The Clinch flows into the Tennessee River, drinking water for millions downstream. The fences are still up. The contamination hasn't stopped. Number 22. Pisgah National Forest Classified Watersheds. Inside Pisgah National Forest in western North Carolina, watershed protection zones with restricted access exist that most hikers don't know about. The headwaters feeding the French Broad River supply drinking water to Asheville. After contamination events in the early 2000s, the Forest Service designated several drainages as restricted management areas. But there's a second layer. Parts of the boundary overlap with land used by the Army for chemical weapons transport during World War II. The Forest Service has never disclosed those routes. Soil surveys turn up anomalous readings that get flagged and quietly resolved. The public trails are beautiful. Stay on them. Number 21. Dahlonega gold vaults and restricted mine shafts. The first major American gold rush wasn't in California. It was Dahlonega, Georgia, 1828. The federal government built a branch mint here in 1838 to process the ore. When the Confederacy seized the mint in 1861, the exact disposition of the federal gold reserves was never fully accounted for in post-war reconciliation. There are approximately 200 sealed mine shafts in the Dahlonega area, many on state forest land. The Georgia EPD has closed several due to oxygen-deficient atmospheres and collapse risk. People still go looking. People have died. The gold story keeps drawing them in. The ground keeps making them disappear. Number 20. Pocahontas Exhibition Mine, Tazewell County. In Tazewell County, Virginia, there's a coal seam geologists called the finest metallurgical coal ever discovered on Earth. The British Navy bought the entire output. The exhibition mine is technically a museum now. Behind the museum section, the original tunnels extend for miles, sealed. The Buchanan County extension of this seam passes through land the USGS flagged in 2003 for elevated methane concentrations, consistent with active coal seam gas migration. Whether the recommended monitoring ever started is not publicly documented. The methane doesn't need a permit to migrate. The tunnels don't care who owns the surface. Number 19. Blue Ridge Parkway Restricted Archaeological Sites. The Blue Ridge Parkway is the most visited unit in the National Park System. Its 469-mile corridor contains over 1,100 documented archaeological sites, and a significant portion are formally restricted under the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. The parkway cuts through ancestral Cherokee homeland, and the density of pre-contact cultural sites along the ridgeline is extraordinary. After organized collection rings began selling artifacts to private dealers in the 1990s, the NPS stopped publicizing site locations entirely. The coordinates of most restricted sites are deliberately absent from any public database. That's the only approach that has worked. Number 18. Monongah Mine Disaster Site. On December 6, 1907, 2 coal mines in Monongah, West Virginia, exploded simultaneously. The worst industrial disaster in American history. Between 361 and 500 men and boys died. The exact number never confirmed because the company didn't require miners to sign in. Many bodies were never recovered. The tunnels were too unstable. They're still in the ground. The mine voids beneath Monongah are active subsidence risks. Several structures condemned due to ground movement. Somewhere under Monongah, miners who died in 1907 are still there. Nobody mapped it precisely then. Nobody has since. Number 17. Fort Detrick adjacent farmland, Frederick, Maryland. Fort Detrick was the center of America's biological weapons program. What gets less attention is the farmland immediately adjacent to the perimeter. Between the 1940s and 1960s, open-air testing of biological agents was conducted at Fort Detrick. The wind did not respect the fence line. Carroll Creek downstream showed elevated bacterial counts in independent testing as recently as 2018. The EPA placed portions of the base on the Superfund list, but the adjacent farmland was never included in the remediation boundary. Soil sampling has detected anomalous microbial signatures in parcels abutting the northeast perimeter, still being farmed. Biology hasn't gotten the memo. Number 16. Dolly Sods Wilderness Unexploded Ordnance Zone. Dolly Sods looks like something ripped out of northern Canada and dropped in the Alleghenies, windswept plateau, sphagnum bogs, and a restricted zone the Forest Service maps but doesn't advertise. During World War II, Camp Seneca Hills used the sods as an artillery range. The Army left. The shells stayed, thousands of them. Live ordnance scattered across a multi-hundred-acre section. 8 formal sweeps since the 1980s, each finding more. In 2010, a hiker found a live 75mm shell in a boulder field, still armed. The ordnance zone is marked with red blazes. Hikers who don't know what red blazes mean walk through regularly. The shells don't care. Number 15. Clinch Mountain Wildlife Management Area, Russell County. The Clinch River contains more species of freshwater mussels than the entire continent of Europe. Several are found nowhere else on Earth. Virginia's Department of Wildlife Resources has restricted significant stretches of riverbank. Not collection. It's feet. Mussel beds are fragile enough that wading during spawning can collapse years of recovery. Biologists have permits. Recreational anglers in restricted zones get citations. Chemical plant discharge records along the North Fork of the Holston, which feeds the Clinch, were sealed under a consent decree in 2007 that has never been made public. The mussels are still dying. The consent decree is sealed. Number 14. Roan Mountain Restricted High Elevation Bog Zones. On the Tennessee-North Carolina border, Roan Mountain hosts the largest natural rhododendron garden in the world. The U.S. Forest Service has restricted access to core bog zones on the summit plateau. Rare plants began disappearing, not poached or trampled, but genetically swamped by introduced garden varieties brought by hikers transplanting flowers from their yards. The bogs are now managed as genetic preserves. Rangers have removed thousands of introduced plants by hand over 20 years. The summit is publicly accessible. The restricted core zones are unmarked. You'd walk right through one without knowing it. That's exactly the problem. Number 13. New River Gorge National Park, Thurmond Restricted District. Thurmond, West Virginia was once the richest town in the state. In 1910, it processed more freight than Cincinnati. By 1970, the permanent population was 4. Several buildings are restricted because they're falling apart, but the restriction that matters is underground. The gorge walls beneath Thurmond contain geological formations the USGS has classified as active failure risk. Sections of the rim are unmaintained ledges of Pennsylvanian sandstone, losing structural integrity every winter. 3 park visitors have required technical rescue from the Thurmond section since 2015. The gorge doesn't care about preservation. Number 12. The Greenbrier Bunker, White Sulphur Springs. For 30 years, the Greenbrier Resort contained the most classified federal facility in the eastern United States, hiding inside a 5-star hotel. Project Greek Island was 112,000 square feet, 720 feet underground, blast doors 18 inches thick, built to house all 535 members of Congress through a nuclear war. Maintenance staff were federal employees who never told their spouses what they did at work. The Washington Post blew the secret in 1992. The government decommissioned it within days. Tours run through parts of it now. The sealed sections have never been released. The government has never confirmed whether the Greenbrier was the only one. Number 11. Yellow Creek, Kentucky, Contaminated Watershed. In Bell County, Kentucky in the early 1980s, residents noticed their creek ran different colors on different days. Pink, black. Livestock died. Children got sick. A tannery upstream had been discharging for years with permits that were never enforced. The legal battle lasted a decade and became a foundational environmental justice case. Yellow Creek concerned citizens forced a partial cleanup. The creek near the original discharge point is still formally restricted for contact recreation. The tannery is gone. The contamination isn't. In 2022, state testing found elevated chromium at 2 monitoring stations, an advisory that most people in Bell County never heard about. Number 10. Shiloh National Military Park, Restricted Artillery Grounds. At Shiloh, April 1862, 23,746 men became casualties in 2 days. The NPS maintains 4,000 acres with significant portions restricted, not for reverence, for archaeology. Ordnance teams have recovered over 600 pieces of unexploded Civil War artillery. The Park Service estimates thousands more remain. The soil chemistry preserves iron. Shells that fell in 1862 still carry viable propellant charges. In 2008, a park contractor hit a 12-pound cannonball with a bulldozer during approved construction, still live. The restricted areas are marked, but Shiloh's boundary contains private inholdings, where the battlefield continues outside the fence on land that has never been swept. Number 9. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Y-12 Security Complex. Oak Ridge built the bomb. The Y-12 National Security Complex is where highly enriched uranium for the first atomic weapons was produced and where it's still being processed today. The entire city was built in secret in 1942. It didn't appear on any map. Decades of processing left an estimated 2.4 million pounds of mercury in the East Fork Poplar Creek drainage, still moving downstream. The creek runs through a residential neighborhood. State advisories warn against consuming fish. Still operational behind fences that haven't changed much since 1942. The mercury cleanup timeline runs to 2047. Number 8. Cranberry Glades Botanical Area, Monongah National Forest. In the Monongah National Forest, there's a place that geographically belongs in Canada. Cranberry Glades is a series of sphagnum bogs at 3,400 feet, home to sundews and pitcher plants. The boardwalk is open. The restricted buffer zone is closed to all foot traffic. Bog mat floats over peat columns going down 12 feet. One wrong step punches through. In 1994, a researcher broke through in a restricted section and sank to her chest before colleagues extracted her. The signs say, "Stay on the boardwalk." They mean it in a structural sense most people don't appreciate until they're standing on something that is technically not ground. Number 7. Anniston Army Depot, Calhoun County, Alabama. The Anniston Army Depot stored 7% of the entire U.S. chemical weapons stockpile. Mustard gas, nerve agent GB, nerve agent VX. 661 tons. The Army completed incineration in 2011 after legal battles with residents who fought the plan and lost. The contamination history predates the chemical weapons. Industrial solvents and PCBs were discharged into local drainage from the 1940s through the 1970s. The town of Anniston also contains PCB contamination from the Monsanto plant that operated there from 1929 to 1971. EPA documents show Monsanto knew the fish were dying and said nothing for decades. The depot is restricted. The PCBs are in the soil. The two zones overlap. Number 6. Pine Ridge Coal Slurry Impoundment Zones, Logan County. West Virginia has more coal slurry impoundments than any other state. Artificial lakes behind earthen dams filled with toxic liquid laced with heavy metals, sitting above populated valleys. Federal safety ratings classify several Logan County impoundments as having failure modes that would be immediately catastrophic to downstream communities. Hazard maps are public record. Thousands of people in the flood path. On February 26, 1972, a coal slurry dam at Buffalo Creek failed and killed 125 people in under 3 hours. That was 53 years ago. The dams are still there. They're bigger now. Number 5. Nantahala National Forest Restricted Cherokee Ancestral Sites. In the Nantahala National Forest, significant archaeological sites are deliberately off every public map. The Eastern Band of Cherokee co-manages cultural areas within the forest. The locations of sacred sites and burial areas are withheld under federal consultation agreements. It's practical, not sinister. The last time these locations became widely known, they were looted. Organized pot hunting rings ran in western North Carolina from the 1960s through the 1990s. When the Forest Service mapped the damage in 2003, over 40% of known pre-contact sites in 2 ranger districts had been disturbed or destroyed. Protected by not being findable. That's what's worked. Number 4. Sequoyah Fuels Nuclear Facility, Gore, Oklahoma. Sequoyah Fuels in Gore, Oklahoma was the site of one of the worst nuclear processing accidents in American history outside the weapons program. In January 1986, a cylinder of uranium hexafluoride ruptured, reacting with moisture to form hydrofluoric acid. 1 worker died. 100 were injured. 77 residents sought medical treatment. The facility closed in 1993 when contamination liabilities made it economically impossible to continue. The site has been on the EPA Superfund list since 2003. A 2019 court-ordered assessment found cleanup had moved a contaminated plume toward previously clean areas. Gate-locked since 1993, the contamination hasn't stopped. Number 3. Rampart Section, Daniel Boone National Forest. In the Red River Gorge of Daniel Boone National Forest, a restricted zone called the Rampart Area contains pre-contact rock art from 500 to 3,000 years old. The official restriction is active raptor nesting. Below that, documented looting damage to pictograph panels. Below that, a 1975 Forest Service memo obtained through FOIA referencing chemical soil contamination from an unnamed source in the northern drainage. That contamination has never been publicly characterized. Whatever is in the northern drainage, it isn't a nesting peregrine. The restricted section is walled off for reasons the agency has been careful never to fully explain. Number 2. Copper Basin, Polk County, Tennessee. In southeastern Tennessee, copper smelting from 1850 to 1987 stripped every living thing from 50 square miles. Sulfur dioxide killed every tree, every shrub, every blade of grass. The topsoil blew away. NASA used the basin as a calibration surface for Earth observation satellites because it was the closest thing to a dead planet on the continental United States. Former smelting sites remain formally restricted. Arsenic and heavy metals still exceed safe contact levels. Trees came back. Topsoil didn't. And the drainage feeds the Ocoee River, the same river that hosted the 1996 Olympic whitewater events. They didn't mention that in the broadcast. Number 1. New River State Forest, abandoned AEC test shafts, Ashe County, North Carolina. In a section of New River State Forest not on standard hiking maps, sealed concrete shafts sit. Nobody will tell you what's in them. The AEC drilled them in the late 1950s as a geological characterization study for deep geological repository potential. Government language for, "We were looking at this mountain as a place to store nuclear waste forever." The AEC walked away. What was introduced into those shafts remains undisclosed. The forest grew back over the caps. Hikers can find them sticking above the leaf line. The concrete is cracked on at least 2. Whatever is in there has been there for 65 years, and nobody is in a hurry to find out. That's your answer right there. If you made it this far, subscribe, and I will see you in tomorrow's video.